Sometimes shift in businesses are seismic, sometimes they're subtle, but one thing's for sure, business is always on the move. Neglecting to keep up with change is the fastest formula for failure. Here are 10 businesses that failed to adapt to change. Some went down in a public blaze of flaming failure, and others were a slow fade to obscurity. From each, we can learn some valuable business moves not to make and hone our own business success from their insight. Welcome to alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get inspired. We hope you enjoy this list we've taken from a selection of different industries and highlighted others for the surprisingly bad decisions that took them out. Let's get started. Number 1. Nokia and BlackBerry were first to the market and fast to fail. This declining duo each operated in their own era. Nokia dominated the introduction of cellular networks in the 1990s. BlackBerry took up the baton in the 2000s. Nokia's big mistake was not realizing how the arrival of the internet would affect voice communication. They failed to focus on software and kept focusing on hardware because their leadership feared they would lose customers if they changed too much. But it was actually the failure to change enough that ultimately led to their demise. When they finally launched a smartphone behind the iPhone, the Nokia operating system was a mess, and the bad user experience took them off the board as an industry leader. BlackBerry made a similar series of errors from their game-changing arched keyboard. They failed to shift the market toward bigger touchscreens. BlackBerry was more concerned about protecting what it already had than innovating with what the market wanted. The current CEO, John Chen, announced in 2017 that under their new strategy, they would focus on software development, including security and applications. They're outsourcing hardware to partners, but that seems too little too late, as they've faded into irrelevancy. I guess we'll have to wait and see what they come up with. Number 2. Blockbuster didn't listen to what its clients wanted. In 2004, Blockbuster had successfully transitioned from VHS to DVD, and it was at an all-time peak. But only a few years into operation, Netflix was already offering shipped DVD rentals. Blockbuster declined an offer to partner with Netflix in 2000. Blockbuster's CEO John Antioco saw Netflix as only serving a niche market and not a mainstream business like Blockbuster. The addition of Netflix's streaming service was the final nail in the coffin, and by 2010, Blockbuster had filed for bankruptcy and continued losing brick-and-mortar stores. On the flip side, Netflix is valued at over $28 billion and is growing internationally. Number 3. Segway never defined how to use their $5,000 product. Who would have thought that a space-age looking motorized form of transport would have ended up only being used by a few mall cops and tour groups because it lacked a clear identity? In 2001, when the Segway entered the market, it offered something brand new. It had all the opportunity to revolutionize transportation, and it was fuel efficient. Despite the cost of $5,000, there was a lot of hype around it, which made people pretty interested. But Segway failed to define exactly what its motorized scooters were for. The police didn't know how to handle them. Were they for sidewalks or for roads? Was it safe enough for street handling? And lastly, Segway users were called out constantly for being lazy as they whizzed by pedestrians. It became clear consumers weren't willing to fork out $5,000 for a scooter you weren't allowed to use or were insulted for riding. Number 4. Kodak's moment has passed. It's hard to believe, but digital photography was invented in 1975 by Kodak. When Steve Sasson, a Kodak engineer, brought the idea of digital photography to Kodak leadership, it was shut down. Fear of what it would do to their current film market led to them canning the technology. But us as Aluxers know from our video 15 Lessons from Jeff Bezos, it's better to cannibalize yourself than let your competitors do it for you. Kodak completely missed the digital revolution boat, a movement they could have led as early as 1975. This failure saw them filing for bankruptcy in 2012. But has the light completely gone out for Kodak? Keep watching because some bold moves will be revealed in our bonus fact at the end. Number 5. Macy's could have been in everyone's living rooms, but instead, they're closing stores. In 1980, Macy's was approached with the idea to start selling its products on a cable television channel. The 100-year-old department store with a huge following felt the idea was passé and wouldn't sit well with their customers, so they declined the offer, opting instead to stick to store sales. However, the idea was picked up and QVC was soon on the market, selling to Macy's customers from the comfort of their own home. The QVC Home Channel's products were selling like hotcakes. Customers loved the convenience and the thrill of shopping at home. In fact, it became the largest competitor to Macy's department stores. To this day, Macy's CEO Terry Lundgren maintains that shoppers prefer brick-and-mortar stores, but all the numbers beg to differ. Macy's continues to drop in turnover and stores continue to close. Number 6. AOL and Yahoo were the heavy hitters in the dot-com era, but failed to keep up with the new players. In the mid-1990s, America Online was known as AOL for short, but not long enough, because they went from being the leading instant messaging platform and one of only 2 internet providers to rapidly plummeting into obscurity. Microsoft's Messenger entered, and AOL did nothing to introduce a new strategy to retain customers and offer a better service. AOL also failed to offer broadband upgrades to its massive dial-up subscriber base, so lost monthly subscriptions. Adding insult to injury, a failed merger with Time Warner worth an estimated $350 billion is known as the biggest failed merger of the 21st century. Similarly, Yahoo was a big gun in the early internet game. At its height, it was valued at $125 billion. They were one of the main players in online advertising in 2005, but failed to recognize the importance of search and instead invested energy into becoming a media giant. It wasn't long before Google took Yahoo's slice of the pie, the baker, and the whole pie shop. Ironically, Yahoo had launched some excellent tools that would have really set them apart, but they failed to capitalize on it. Yahoo Briefcase is one example, which offered cloud storage long before Dropbox or Google Drive. They also missed some great merger opportunities, including refusing a deal to buy Google in 2002. They also made a grave error by letting Mark Zuckerberg leave their offices in 2006 with Facebook under his arm after they lowered their deal offer and he refused to sell. Failing to look ahead and capitalize on advancements is what left Yahoo behind in the dust. Number 7. Hostess's future is the story of many food brands. This is only one brand in a long list of processed food brands that have failed to keep up with consumer trends. Kids of the 90s enjoyed the wonder of a Twinkie in their lunchbox, but as health and wellness awareness kicked into hyperdrive in the 21st century, Hostess and other highly processed foods made no moves to change their formula. From sugary cereals to mouth-coloring cool drink, there's been a critical shift in nutrition, and preservatives, sugar, and trans fats aren't invited to the party. In 2012, after declining sales and a lack of effort to rebrand, Hostess filed for bankruptcy. Billionaire Dean Metropoulos bailed out Hostess. He planned to cater to the nostalgia movement of the kids of the 90s and relaunched Hostess's favorite brands. There has been some upward movement, but once everyone has sampled a Twinkie, it's more likely it's gonna go back to green juice and low GI for the majority. A diet Hostess certainly isn't gonna do it for them. Number 8. Concorde flew fast and burnt out. For almost 30 years, the world had the option of supersonic transport, or SST. Air travel at twice the speed of sound was possible. A British-French airline formed and Concorde Travel was born. They offered London or Paris to New York in 3.5 hours for $8,000 round trip. This speed of travel came at a high price, and we don't mean the ticket. The sonic boom caused major noise pollution for everyone in its path. It was fuel inefficient and could only carry 120 passengers or so to split the cost. The upkeep of aircrafts was extremely high, and the Concorde was analog. The kind of clientele that flew Concorde had an incredibly high expectation of onboard service. However, the plane's narrow design didn't allow much headroom, and the seats were very narrow. A spare plane had to remain parked in case of a late departure in New York to enable the liner to run on time, which made the business model hard to profit from. After Air France Flight 4590 crashed in 2000, an accident that caused the death of all on board, Concorde scrambled to recover reputational damage. The general downturn in air travel after the September 11th attacks in 2001 put Concorde into freefall. In 2003, the last Concorde flight took off, and the company closed its doors. There is talk of new versions of turbojet-powered air travel, but still to this day it remains a pie in the sky. Number 9. Abercrombie & Fitch. Abercrombie & Fitch is one of those brands we mentioned that has gone down in a flaming wreckage. In the early 2000s, you couldn't go out without seeing Abercrombie & Fitch emblazoned on trendy young people's t-shirts. It was a symbol of status and fashion. When large logos and high-priced brands lost their appeal, A&E didn't try to adjust to the times. Rather, the CEO Mike Jeffries went on a bizarre publicity campaign trying to win back followers. In 2006, he was quoted as saying, "Sex sells. That's why we hire good-looking people in our stores, because good-looking people attract other good-looking people, and we want to market cool, good-looking people. We don't want to market to anyone other than that." As you can imagine, this wasn't well received and led to boycotting A&E. To make matters worse, a district manager was caught saying, "We would rather burn clothes than give them to poor people." This also didn't sit well with a growing social consciousness movement and proved just how out of touch the brand had become. Abercrombie & Fitch became the most hated brand in the US and further abroad. They've tried to win back customers to their empty stores over the years, but to no avail. And at this point, A&E just seems outdated and offensive to young audiences. Number 10. Hummer. There've only been a few flaming failures as spectacularly public as the Hummer. Arnold Schwarzenegger first owned the oil-hungry Hummer. It was GM's response for a tiny market of civilians that wanted to drive a military-looking vehicle around town. It wasn't long before popular TV shows started the Hummer jokes, and from being a status symbol of power and wealth, it became a symbol of greed and poor taste. Consumers had already begun to get a taste for environmentally friendly living, and the Hummer was the complete opposite. To top it off, it was launched around the 2000s energy crisis, and the H1 model guzzled a greedy 8 to 12 miles per gallon. The brand was sent to the bargain bin in most secondhand car dealers. With no prospects of reviving market interest, in 2009 the brand was shut down. There are developments for a relaunch of an electric Hummer in 2022, but the question still remains, does anyone really need that much car? Electric, gas-driven, or otherwise? And Aluxers, that's a wrap on today's list. What is the greatest business demise you've seen caused by a failure to adapt? Would you fly Concorde or buy a Hummer if they made a comeback? Let us know in the comments. And of course, for sticking with us until the end, here's that bonus we hinted at earlier. Is Kodak having another moment? In January 2020, Kodak suddenly reappeared, and their share price more than doubled on the New York Stock Exchange. Why? Because Kodak announced the launch of its own cryptocurrency called Kodak Coin. It's a part of a wider blockchain platform that aims to protect photographers and help them control their image rights. Whether this new technology will be Kodak's new moment is still a developing story. Thank you for spending some time with us, Aluxers. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. We also handpicked these videos, which we recommend you watch next. You can talk to us on all social medias or ask a question on our website, alux.com. Thank you for being an Aluxer, and we'll see you back tomorrow.